Let's dive right into this explainer looking at Exodus chapter 5. We're unpacking a really stark historical reality today, literally making bricks without straw. And we'll see how this ancient event perfectly illustrates the cycle of human bondage and ultimately rescue. We're looking at a story of extreme oppression, right? But what's fascinating is what it tells us about our own deeply ingrained struggles today. You see, this isn't just dusty history. It's a mirror reflecting our own lives.
And man, just think about the absolute defiance we see right out of the gate. When Moses and Aaron step up and demand freedom for their people, Pharaoh doesn't even blink. He just shoots back, "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice?" With that single arrogant question, he instantly draws the battle lines for a massive spiritual war. You have to understand, this was never merely some political negotiation over labor laws. No, this was the kingdom of darkness violently clashing with the kingdom of God.
So what does Pharaoh do? His retaliation is literally a masterclass in cruelty. He doesn't just reject Moses' demand. He totally cuts off the vital supply of straw while demanding the exact same daily brick quota from the already exhausted Israelites. Imagine that for a second. You're completely drained, and suddenly the very thing that made your impossible job even slightly doable is just ripped away.
To really get the weight of this, we need to look at the actual ancient Egyptian brick-making process. Why did losing that straw make this grueling, sun-baked labor almost impossible to survive? Well, you had to mix the mud, form it in molds, dry it in the scorching desert sun, and then somehow carry these incredibly heavy blocks to the construction sites. And the straw? It wasn't just cheap filler. As it decayed, it released humic acid, which acted as a chemical binder, giving the bricks immense strength. Without it, the Israelites literally had to scramble across the desert searching for stubble. They effectively doubled their workload just to survive a single day.
And here is the truly wild part. This isn't just some old fable. Archaeologists have actually uncovered ancient Egyptian papyrus scrolls that detail these exact slave labor systems. We're talking strict daily quotas, and yes, even documented complaints from workers about having to make bricks without straw. This historical proof gives the spiritual metaphor we're about to dive into incredible weight. It grounds the whole text in absolute, undeniable reality.
So how does this map onto humanity's spiritual condition? It's actually a perfect parallel. On one side of the ledger, we have the gritty historical reality, Egypt, pharaohs, and the exhausted Hebrews. But flip that over and look at the spiritual side. Egypt becomes the bondage of sin. Pharaoh represents the cruel mastery of Satan. And those exhausted, broken workers? Well, that's burdened humanity, isn't it? Just trying to survive while dragging around weights we were never designed to carry.
Jesus himself actually laid this out super clearly when he said, "Everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin." Just like Pharaoh, sin acts as this harsh, relentless taskmaster. It promises you freedom, sure, but then it constantly demands more, leaving us completely trapped in a prison house we can't escape by our own strength. It's incredibly deceptive. It just keeps shouting, "More bricks, less straw." And what maybe started as a small, seemingly harmless habit slowly tightens its grip until it's running the whole show.
Which brings us to a deeply tragic question, really. Why do we ask our oppressors for relief? Think about the Hebrew foremen. When they were beaten for missing their impossible quotas, they didn't cry out to God for true liberation. No, they went directly back to Pharaoh, the very guy crushing them, to beg for better conditions. They even called themselves your servants to their abuser. They were so totally used to their bondage that they couldn't even imagine what true freedom looked like.
And honestly, we experience this exact same relapse today. When life gets hard, what do? We run right back to our modern pharaohs. Anger, addiction, pride, lust. Actually, maybe it's self-pity for some of us, or just generally unhealthy habits. We mistakenly hope the very chains that bind us will somehow magically bring us comfort. Instead of running to God for real freedom, we're basically begging our addictions or our prides just make the slavery a little bit easier to handle today. But the stark truth is, sin can never rescue us from sin. It just doesn't work that way.
To make matters even worse, when Pharaoh literally laughed them out of the palace, the Israelites turned all their anger onto Moses and Aaron. And it's a completely natural human reaction. When we're suffering, we immediately look for a visible scapegoat. It's so much easier than turning our frustration into desperate, honest prayer. But as we see here, bitterness and blame never actually lead to freedom.
But here's the turning point. Remember this. The absolute deepest moments of suffering almost always arrive right before God steps in. Israel's pain reached its absolute unbearable peak right before their rescue.
When it feels like your straw is entirely gone and the quota is higher than it's ever been, that is exactly when the stage is perfectly set for deliverance. And how exactly does he deliver them? There's this beautiful imagery from later in Exodus that perfectly illustrates it. God didn't just negotiate lighter workloads for the Israelites. He didn't just toss them a little extra straw, He completely carried them out of bondage with his divine power. He says, "I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." When they had absolutely no power left to save themselves, God came down in sheer power and lifted them to safety. Ultimately, this entire ancient picture is fulfilled in Jesus Christ, the true and greater deliverer. He steps right into our modern, spiritual Egypt to completely shatter the chains of sin, Satan, and death, chains we could never, ever break on our own. He doesn't just offer to improve our living conditions while we stay in captivity, no. He completely liberates us so we can actually live for his glory. He's the ultimate rescuer.
And this contrast is really the absolute core of our explainer today. While a cruel world continually demands more bricks to crush you, Christ was crushed for you. Think about it. Pharaoh says, "Work harder just to survive." But Jesus cries from the cross, "It is finished." The ultimate quota has been met, paid in full by his grace. You no longer have to desperately build your identity, brick by exhausting brick.
Connecting this right back to our lives today, the communion table serves as this profound, tangible reminder of the massive, redeeming cost of our complete liberation. We remember his body broken, his blood shed, his cross endured, and his ultimate victory accomplished. It's a physical reminder that we don't have to approach life as trembling, exhausted slaves anymore. We get to live as redeemed sons and daughters carried on eagle's wings.
The true deliverer has already arrived, and that means your chains are broken. And the same God who brought Israel out of Egypt is ready to rescue you today. The bondage will not last forever. So I want to leave you with this final, ultimate question to chew on. Are you still exhaustingly trying to make bricks without straw on your own? Or are you finally ready to let the deliverer carry you into true freedom? Thanks for joining this explainer, and we'll see you next time.